This is Fort Hare University, one of the oldest universities on the continent with a rich history of black academic tradition. Its alumni include Govan Mbeki, Desmond Tutu and Robert Sobukwe. It was here at the University of Fort Hare that Nelson Mandela met Oliver Tambo. A centre of excellence until fraud, corruption and mismanagement threatened its very existence. In November of 2017, Sakhela Buhlungu is employed as Vice-Chancellor of Fort Hare. His attempts to combat corruption lead to threats that culminate in a January assassination attempt that kills his bodyguard. The year before, the university's transport manager is killed. To date, 17 government officials, including politicians, have been forced to deregister as a result of registration fraud. The uncapturing and renewal project is a dangerous one, but the man staring down the barrel of a gun is determined to succeed. My guest tonight is Vice-Chancellor at the University of Fort Hare, Sakhela Buhlungu. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thanks, Senator.
Apologies for being a bit late, but we had protests this morning because people in the area where we were staying hadn't had water since March. And I believe there's a court case this morning too, which is dealing with the arrests of assassinations made towards
Indeed. There's a court appearance by one freshly arrested accused. There are 5 that are inside, some of whom abandoned bail, others were denied bail. Then there's a policeman who's still going through a bail application.
Is this for the assassination of your bodyguard?
Yes, indeed. And then that's 6 with the policeman. Then in court today there might be 1 or 2 more, which will bring the total to 8 now. Yeah.
Gosh.
All of them connected to the 2 assassinations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Professor, how many assassination attempts have you survived?
It's hard to say, but the 2 that spring to mind immediately. One was a shooting at my house in the morning of the 18th of March 2022. Shots were fired into the house. As a matter of fact, months later, a bullet was found lodged deep inside my vehicle, which is parked outside. And then, of course, there was then the one attempt that ended with the fatal shooting of Mr. Vesely, who was my bodyguard and protector.
I'm sorry.
That was the one.
The murder or assassination of your bodyguard, I presume, must have been very painful for both you and your family.
That one is a wound that hasn't healed at all, and which will take very long to heal, because it was very immediate. This is a man I worked with all the time. This is a man who drove me around. A very good human being. Very good, trustworthy, strong human being.
And of course your transport fleet manager, he too was assassinated.
First, in 2012, Mr. Peter, who was transport manager, Victor Peter, who lived here and has a house here, was assassinated by unknown people. And then fast forward to 2022, Mr. Pietrus Roots, who was again fleet manager, was assassinated in Gonubi. All of them very clearly hits. They were hits by people who wanted to get at someone. And the one of Mr. Vesely clearly was aimed at getting at me. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure those people were not sure whether I was in the car or not, because the car's windows were tinted and it was about to drive into the house.
Who wants you dead?
Whew, that's a story. That's a story in itself. Who wants me dead? I could only guess. Really, and say that it's people who have been eating from this university for decades. People who have been siphoning millions and millions and millions of rand from this university through corrupt means, fraudulent means, inflated invoices, bogus tenders and things like that. Surely those people have interrupted their game, and I'm sure they're not happy where they're sitting, because I'm an obstacle to their personal self-enrichment. And those people are, some of them, employees inside the university, and others are in business or pretend to be business people outside. And one of the, for example, one of the murder accused ran a business outside the university in East London. And then I wouldn't put it past politicians who, for some reason, also are connecting and are connected to bogus and fraudulent kind of operations. Nothing shocks anymore. One of the murder accused right now
It's a policeman.
is a policeman, a detective for that matter.
It's terrifying.
He transported these people, the killers. He deposited money, allegedly, into their bank accounts. He rented cars for them. Surely, in this country, nothing surprises anymore. If we're to get anywhere, we should really start talking much more openly about these things. That person who orchestrated, we must name them. We must name them. Of course, it takes time, court processes take long, but hopefully one day we'll get to a point where that person, or such a person, is named.
Oscar Mabuyane, he is accused of academic fraud, and the Special Investigating Unit has now removed him from that investigation. But can you link him to any of the darkness and the violence and the corruption?
Sadly, I can't. Look, of course, future generations, future investigators will might come to different conclusions, but I don't have any evidence. There's never been any suggestions to me by people investigating, by the authorities, that he is involved. So I wouldn't know at all. In fact, I wouldn't be willing to say. But I must say that there are people. Now, let's put it differently now. There are people who may not necessarily want to get me dead, but there are people who are unhappy with some of the things that we've introduced. The rot has been deep. It's been widespread. It involved many people. And the eating scale was often very small, but in other cases, large amounts of money. So yes, many people have good reasons to be unhappy with me at this institution.
Prof, when you arrived here in February 2017, did you have any idea of how bad the situation was, how the university had deteriorated?
Thinking back to that first day of mine, on the 1st of February 2017, I arrived here, and of course my expectations were pitched correctly. Mm-hmm. They were not too high, but I also knew that there was a lot of work to be done, and that there were solid foundations that had been laid by those before us. So many people attribute the decline of the university's reputation and stature to many different factors. But I actually go back to 1959. 1959 was probably the most painful episode in the history of this university, because there it was, an independent institution with churches and other bodies all pitching in, and the government too, but the government was not running the university. At the stroke of a pen in 1959, the apartheid government basically took the university and handed it over to the Department of Bantu Education, which effectively rendered all staff, academic and support services, as civil servants. And that's when you had an exodus of right-minded people, academics, and chief among whom, of course, was Professor Z.K. Matthews, our first graduate back in 1924. He took a very tough decision 2 years before his retirement in 1961. He decided to resign rather than become a civil servant. And of course, democracy could have stemmed that decline, but underfunding continued to bedevil the university. And the corruption and all those negative cultures continued. And that's what I inherited. I did not know at the time. I didn't have a full sense of the scale of this rot that was deeply seated under the carpet.
Professor, you come here and you've got to effectively uncapture an institution. You've got to root out the criminal networks, the tenderpreneurship that's been going on, but you still have to restore the campus to academic excellence. How do you manage to do both?
It's certainly not an easy kind of undertaking to do that. You have to juggle. You have to juggle. But it is possible. It is doable. You've got to give academics and students stability, uninterrupted teaching and learning contact time. One of the downfalls of some of our institutions is that interruptions to contact teaching and learning is the biggest problem. Because what you then do, you detract and you're taking away from the institution that which a university should be known for, that its training is rigorous, its training can stand the test of time, and that its graduates come fully prepared for the world of work. And so that's one thing that we've done. In the last couple of years, we've been actually without conflict, without strikes, student strikes, and staff strikes for that matter. And just to illustrate how important this is, when I arrived in week 2, the second week of after my arrival, there was a strike in East London that crippled that campus for 7 weeks without teaching. That's half a semester. On the other side, how do you then deal with the crooks? How do you deal with the crooks? It's very difficult because the crooks are not going to let you just do it. They're going to push back. They're going to name call you. They're going to insult you. They're going to smear you. They're going to slander. They've got all sorts of things. And most importantly, they're going to shoot at you.
I mean, you've been described by some colleagues as having the courage of a lion, having nerves of steel, and then by your critics as being a micromanager, as being a man who doesn't suffer fools, who is creating a toxic environment on campus, accusing you of surveillance, which has not been legal. How do you deal with those kind of critics?
There's an analogy that I've used in recent times at Fort Hare, based on my own on-the-ground experience. If you're a heart surgeon and you have a patient presenting with heart problems and difficulties, and you come to the conclusion that something drastic has to be done, what's the first thing that you're going to have to do? It's to cut up the body. It's unpleasant, it's not nice, it's dangerous, it's ugly, it's bloody. But as a heart surgeon would know, you have to, it's unavoidable. You have to open up the body. You might even have to open up the heart itself to unblock it, remove all those clots, close it up, suture it back into shape, suture the body back into shape. And you know what? That patient could actually be a winner at the Comrades Marathon because you've done something. And those who said, don't do it, don't open up the body, chances are that they will not survive. A job that has to be done has got to be done. That's my belief. If there's anything that I can say I did at Fort Hare, it's to do the job as it should be done. Look, the fact of the matter here, you have those old cultures. And those old cultures means that you've got to be hands-on. It's not micromanaging. People's notion of a VC is someone who sits closeted in that office upstairs.
Usually, yes.
They sit at 11 o'clock, they have tea and biscuits. At 3 a.m. they have tea and sandwiches. And at lunch they have a full lunch. And then at 4 o'clock they drive home. Not at Fort Hare, I'm afraid. You have a work ethic that's inherited from this past that I describe, where, for example, this university was run as a Bantustan university, run like a municipality. Now, let's come to, for example, these killings. If people say, okay, we run the university like all these other things, no, we don't. I made a call to the president of the country. I said, President, protect us. Because nobody will. When Mr. Roots died in 2022, there was not a single statement by a single police authority or politician. Not a single one. It was as if a dog had died. Even a dog, people phone and, commiserate and so on and so forth. Now, nothing.
Why?
That's exactly the problem. And so with that VC sitting closeted and drinking tea, Ruth's murder would have come and gone, and he would be forgotten forever. These are challenges of running an institution such as this one. When I came here, it was unknown, it was unheard of for a senior executive to be put through a disciplinary hearing. I did, because that's the only way you can do it.
Which has made you enemies.
Which has made me enemies. But when the truth gets told, long after I'm gone, people will say, that was probably the turning point for this institution, or that and the other was the turning point.
The Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande, made a statement saying, "We can't tolerate a climate of fear on a public campus while proclaiming the right to academic freedom." That doesn't sound very supportive.
Ordinarily, I would not wish to debate the Minister of Higher Education in public. It's safe to say that we who run this institution know exactly what we're doing. We know exactly, at a very minute level, what academic freedom is and what it isn't. We also know that in this country, there is latitude given to all public universities, and we call it autonomy. And in fact, indeed, it does concern one that universities in general, public universities, are treated unevenly. Statements like that don't get made every day about the big universities. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But for some reason, some people find it easy to make statements like that about Fort Hare.
Why?
I frankly, especially for the minister, I won't even hazard a guess as to what would make a minister speak like that. I don't know. He knows better. I think that if you put the minister aside for a second and look at other people and so other critics, it's very simple. It's very, very simple. That there are many people out there who would like to lay their hands on the levers of power and the levers of resources at this institution.
It's become a necessity, sadly, for you to have 24-hour protection, 22 bodyguards for your staff. Your name is on a hit list. Why do you stay?
I think the best start to the answer is, why should I go? Why? Where am I going to run? This is my country. This is my country, just like everybody else. You could go outside and be hit by a bus. You could go outside and be stabbed by some kind of crazy person. If the university is kind enough to offer me some degree of protection, why should I complain?
One of the issues at one of the departments has been one of academic fraud,
yes,
involving one or two politicians. Talk to me about what happened there.
We came across information that there was some irregular activities, including registration or rather admission of students for programs for which they did not meet the requirements. So that's how it started. So we started drilling out to find out. Just at that time, it just also happened, and we became aware that the Special Investigative Unit was also investigating similar issues about us. So we sat down with them and said, listen, we are, we want, first of all, to declare to you that we're investigating these matters ourselves. Why don't we join forces and get one big drill instead of this little drill bits that we have? And so we essentially invited the SIU into Fort Hare. And with our own actions, independent of what they were doing, we had already uncovered a professor who was sitting in this department who was doing this. And we put him through the steps in the form of a DC. It also turned out that this professor actually didn't even have the papers to be in the country. He had come through some bogus means, using bogus kind of devices to get citizenship. The people that we discovered, and I don't want us to confine, because there's this notion that, oh, Forte is targeting politicians. No. The people involved, the numbers are not big, but they're quite significant in the larger scheme of things. They're not just politicians. Let's put it that way. They're not just politicians. Let's just call them public figures, which may be inclusive of politicians.
Including the Premier of the Eastern Cape, who didn't get his degree but tried to get his degree from that department.
Well, I suppose, yes. It's common knowledge now. As a matter of fact, it was him who spoke about it long before we did, because we don't generally speak about students in public. So he spoke about it himself. He went to court, yes.
He did apply for an urgent interdict to have his name withdrawn from the proclamation of the SIU so that he will not be investigated.
His starting point was to get the proclamation declared unlawful, and to argue that the president had acted unlawfully by gazetting, by putting out the proclamation. And of course, he pulled back from that one. In the end, he said, okay, because the degree for which he was enrolled at the time was not mentioned by name in the proclamation, therefore, he should not be investigated. The court granted him that. But the court also left a window for the SIU and said, there's nothing stopping the SIU from amending the proclamation as they've done before, so that it covers all the things that are at issue.
Last question. What advice would you give to ordinary good South Africans who want to claim the country back for good as their own, want to uncapture small pockets of society where they can?
Yeah. If something happens next to you and you do nothing about it, I'm not going to say you're complicit, but you can do better. Something wrong happens next to you and you do nothing? No, do better. Because there's going to be no army, there's going to be no magic or magic wand that's going to come and change the country. The country is going to be changed by people. I was watching this weekend the rally to commemorate 40 years of the UDF.
UDF, yeah.
And I was looking at these people. I said, gosh, you should be sitting there thinking about the future, not nostalgia. Nostalgia is not going to take you anywhere. UDF was UDF and it had its time. Now sitting here like a bunch of children, you're talking about how good the UDF was and so on and so forth. Actually, it's not true. It was complex. It was good, but also it had this other side too. So for me, the thing is, someone must do something, however small. Do something for yourself to begin with. Look after yourself, and look after your neighbors, look after your family, friends, and help somewhere. And I believe that with that we can take back the country. As for taking it back literally and removing capture, well, of course, and again, it may be a cliche to this now, but the vote remains one of the key weapons to uncapture the state. That many people may not realize it. The vote still remains one of the key weapons to change society.
Vice-Chancellor of the University of Fort Hare, Sakhela Buhlungu, thank you so much for your time on My Guest Tonight.
Thank you so much.